Hello. Good morning. It's September the 2nd. Hard to believe it's already September time, but we're continuing on with weekly encouragement, one psalm every week, and this week we are at, without a doubt, the most well-known and popular chapter in the entire Bible. As you can see, I've got my dog in the office today. Bring your dog to work day at the church, so hopefully I won't have to yell at him too much throughout this video. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. First thing right off the bat, David tells us is who it is that is his shepherd. It's not just God. It's not just God in the generic. It's the Lord. And one of the things I understand why the English translations of the Bible put the Tetragrammaton, the covenantal name, sometimes translated Yahweh or Jehovah. I think Yahweh is the more accurate translation. Sometimes they put it in all caps or Lord in all caps to sort of preserve this Hebrew rendering. But the problem with that, I think, is that it comes across as a title and not actually as a name. David is saying here, personally, I know the Lord personally, the personal God of the universe. In other words, Jesus himself is my shepherd. Growing up, we would always get corrected. I remember if we ever said, no, I wasn't talking to you, I was talking to him. And the correction would always be, well, who's him? Him is Dad. Or, you know, we would never actually do this because we knew we could never get away with it. But occasionally, you'll even hear kids say, well, my old man, or, you know, old men will sometimes say, well, the wife or whatnot. No, that's too impersonal. That was why we would always get corrected for it. It's say it personally. They deserve that. And David's certainly saying that I know God personally. I know his name. I'm using it, and his name is what I use when I say what he's doing. He's my shepherd. Next off, he says it's because he knows God personally. I will never lack anything. He's focused on provision. That's I think why Psalm 23 is so well known and so well loved. It talks about God's provision. And I think if we can dissect Psalm 23 here in the remainder of our time together, we can boil it down to the different places in life where we see God's provision. So we see his provision in ordinary times, in fearful times, in dangerous times, and in last times. So first of all, God's provision in the ordinary times. He says, the shepherd makes him lie down in green pastures, leads him beside still waters, restores his soul. Shepherding is a very mundane job. You take the sheep out to pasture if there's no pasture there, or maybe in times of snowy conditions, you will have to cut branches or find other provisions for it. But David's talking about the everyday here. In the everyday ins and outs of life, God is providing for him. Jesus is providing for him. I think oftentimes, or a lot of times, it's easy to forget this, that God, you know, we look for him in times of trouble, but where is he in times of of plenty or even just ordinary times, he's still right there. We need to acknowledge that more, believe that more and more, and thank him for that. Acknowledge him being there in the ordinary, everyday routines of our daily lives. Second place, we see him as in fearful times. The expression is very good. The valley of the shadow of death. Never been to the Holy Land, but from what I understand, the mountains all around Jerusalem are full of valleys. And at the bottom of these 100 or so foot cliffs or cracks in the rocks, there are oftentimes what they call wadis, or puddles of water from underground springs, where oftentimes shepherds would go and take their sheep to get the water that they needed. But in the wilderness, as you can imagine, the pools of water would attract both calm or placid or enjoyable animals and predatory ones. So in these valleys, it would oftentimes be very dangerous for sheep to go. But nevertheless, the shepherd leads them into these valleys. And I think that's the first thing that we can say, is that it is God who oftentimes leads us here, allows us to go into deep and distressful times. Times of diagnosis at the doctor's office that we don't want to hear. Times of deep distress, disappointment, always seems to start with a D. These are, notice the connection here, because I didn't quite ever see this before now. These are the paths of righteousness, oftentimes where God leads us to go through dark patches. But here's the other thing. So first of all, that's one encouragement, that it's God who leads us there. This is where he desires that we go. Life is full of these deep valleys. But more than just that, so often I think we think that God is closer to us in the valleys than he is maybe in the everyday routine of things. But notice that's not what David is saying here. It's not that God ebbs and flows, his presence ebbs and flows in our lives. It's that his provision, his presence is so constant that it's in the dark valleys that we actually realize how close he has always been to us. And I think that's profoundly different, and I think that's incredibly encouraging to note, that it's not in times of deep distress that God draws us closer to him or is somehow drawing us or more present. Is that he's always present. It's just in those circumstances we either look for him more, or we realize certainly how close and how constant he always is. Third place where we see David saying that God provides, or God's provision is known, is in the presence of mine enemies, in times of danger. Again, maybe we don't fear or we don't see danger as much in our lives, although I know for a lot of people in high-risk categories, COVID-19 is a very real danger to them. Where is God's presence? I mean, that's a great question. I think a lot of people are asking, where is God in the midst of the pandemic? Psalm 23 tells us he's right here, just like he's always been. But notice the abundance of provision that you recognize in times of danger. He says, you anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. And this isn't just a meal that you race in gobble down really quick and then you're gone again. It's a time-consuming process. It's actually what you would do with a notable guest. You would anoint them with oil when they came in. You would take your time. Notice again, it's the personal nature of God who is there preparing this table for you. It takes time, but God has that time even in the presence of danger. You see, we are worried about it. We are the ones that are stressed out about it. But it doesn't take God by surprise. It doesn't stress him out. He still continues on with the provisions in the midst of danger. And you notice another thing about this also. It's not as though this abundant, this lavish meal that he's preparing for you is something that you can sort of fill up a doggy bag with afterwards, and that this is this sort of massive meal, take it with you and it will provide for you for weeks to come. No, it's a daily routine. And this tells us something about God's provision in the midst of uncertainty and uncertain times as well, that we need to learn to wait upon him on a daily basis. It's give us this day our daily bread. There's no mention of future provisions. We go forward with faith, trusting that each and every single day the provision will be there. But I think a lot of people's fear with coronavirus has to do with looking down the road. We want to know that everything is shored up and secure for months and months and years to come. But this is actually unbiblical thinking. God, yes, we do provide. We do plan for the future, but we plan for it with the perspective of that we can't be certain of those future plans. The only thing we can be certain of is that each and every single day, God promises that your provisions will be there. It's a very different way of approaching life, actually, that we must wait every single day for God to provide for us, that we can't bank on future provisions to be there. They very well could be there, but we are going to have to learn to wait on and in the daily provisions of life. And then finally, this glorious, and I mean that quite literally, this glorious provision of God's presence in the end times, I guess is what I said, the last times, your future. He says that I will give you abiding rest. Surely these two things, goodness and mercy, or the Hebrew word is hesed. We've talked about that before. This is covenantal love. This is God's self-sacrificing love on your behalf. It's the highest form of love that there possibly is in this world. Goodness and God's covenant faithfulness, God's covenant love will follow me all the days of my life. Or actually, I like the translation a little bit better for the verb here, to follow. It's actually to pursue. There's a directness. There's again, going back to personal terms. Goodness and God's covenant mercy, or God's covenant love, will pursue after me all the days of my life. So in this life, I can count on God's goodness and love constantly chasing after me, even and especially when we go astray, which we all do from time to time. It pursues after you, that hound of heaven, as Francis Thompson so keenly put it in his poem by that same name, pursues after constantly all the days of our lives. And then again, this repetition of God's provision, even in our passing from this world and into the next. All the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It doesn't get any more constant than that, that this is our resting place. This is our true home, is in heaven, marked by the personal presence of Jesus Christ here and now. So as the confession says, that the catechism reinforces that when we die, the souls of believers immediately pass into the immediate presence of Jesus Christ, where they are kept securely until the resurrection. So you can see from beginning to end, this constant presence of God in your life and this pursuit of Him after you, giving you goodness and mercy, knowing, and this is the encouragement here, Christian, that you will never lack anything if you know God personally through His Son, Jesus Christ. You will not lack anything in ordinary times. You will not lack anything in fearful times. You will not lack anything in times of danger. And you will not lack anything when you are called home to glory. So trust in that. Put your life in His hands. He will and does and will always care for you. Take care for now. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.